are live. Not a full minute. Okay. Hello and welcome to Unstuck, the Road to Reinvention. I'm your host, Lisa Neller, and I am a reinvention life coach. I help women flourish through the use of positive psychology, transformative conversation, and self-coaching. So those three things. And so if you want to learn more about me, head over to my website, lisanellercoaching.com. And if you are an empty nesting woman and you're looking for some direction, go over to reinventionlifecoach.com. I have a free video series there that you can grab and enjoy. So with that, I want to tell you that this is my third episode of Unstuck, and I'm so excited to be sharing the information with you that hopefully will help you flourish in a lot of different ways. And today, my guest is actually another broadcast journalist. I happen to know several of them. What's great about journalists is that they really get deadlines, they get lighting, they get all this stuff. And
That's
so
right.
It's so fun. But my guest today has gone through some reinvention of her own. Her name is Kim Barnes. And Kim has spent, 30 years on the air, so 3 decades. She was an award-winning reporter and news anchor for 15 years, much in the city of Austin in the great state of Texas. Kim also taught television news reporting to students at the University of Texas, which is her alma mater.
Coco?
Is that it?
Yeah, Coco.
Cool. And since leaving the newsroom, she's been seen and heard in television commercials, corporate videos, and she does voiceover work. And she also has done some sales along the way. In one of her reinvention periods, Kim excelled in a direct sales company and discovered that she not only loved sales, but was really pretty good at it. So she'll share more of that in a little bit. Her newest reinvention is as a business owner specializing in media, the thing that she knows the best. So currently, Kim is using all of her skills as the owner of BarnesTeamMedia, where she and her husband, help people get comfortable and confident on camera so they can do video. Now, they help people with live streaming and media interviews and things like that so they can effectively build their own authority and grow their business. So this is such a great thing to have, and I probably should take some lessons from Kim and her husband. So her husband, Mike, was a sportscaster for 30 years, and he's currently working with her now. They have 2 big kids. Their son is 23 and a graduate of Texas A&M, and their daughter is 20, a sophomore at the University of Texas. Now, I met Kim online a couple of years ago. I was networking, looking for new friends, new acquaintances, business referral partners, and just cool people that I could hang out with. So I'm delighted that we have reconnected, Kim and I, to give you this interview. So welcome, Kim. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be with you tonight.
I'm excited too. And you have a great story for us. So I like to just start at the beginning and kind of find out more about you. Where did you grow up? What kind of things interested you, and what got you involved in journalism?
I grew up in Houston. I lived there. I moved there when I was 4 and lived there my whole life until I went off to college, and have never been back. But if you ask me, that's where I'd still say I was from. But I was always curious and always interested in knowing things and kind of feeling like I had the information. But interestingly, I did not go to college thinking that journalism was going to be my path. I actually went to college thinking I wanted to be a doctor. And I remember when I did the Berkman test when I was a senior in high school. That's one of those kind of career development quizzes you can take, or those tests. And a friend of mine's dad was actually the facilitator of that. And I remember him telling me after seeing my results, he said, "I'm not saying that you couldn't be a doctor, but I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily stack up with the things that you probably are going to be naturally really good at. And I thought, well, I want to know about that. I want to be a doctor. And what's funny is that looking back, my number one feature or category at that time was persuasive. And I'm not sure if they still use those same things, but it was sort of like teaching and sales and things like that all fell into persuasive. And I thought, oh, no, I'm going to be a doctor. And so I went to college thinking I was going to be pre-med. And what was funny is that very quickly did I realize, oh, I don't really love science that much. And I realized that I think that I thought I should be a doctor because I just wanted to show that I could be if I wanted to be. I've always been a little bit of a stubborn, maybe.
Watch me.
My husband and I actually had a discussion the other day where I bet I was probably one of those kids that said, I do it. I do it. You know what I mean? And my mom doesn't remember those things from when I was growing up to be able to say that, yes, you were very, I just feel like I was probably really determined like that. So anyway, I quickly realized, don't really love science. And I don't know that I would, the extra 8 years, the 10 years in college would necessarily be the most productive if I'm really doing something that's not within those, my natural gifts. And I remember seeing two older girls that were in my sorority, and I would see them walking into the sorority house, and they had this dates me, their tape recorder and their microphone that they were using as part of a radio show, a radio class that they were in, radio journalism class that they were in. And I thought, now that's interesting, because you get to ask lots of questions. I've always been kind of nosy and curious. So what better thing to do than be a journalist? Because you get paid to do that. Like, that's your job, to be able to ask questions. And so I just kind of watched them and thought, okay, that sounds really interesting. And then just from then on, I was all in and really decided, and I did everything kind of by the book. You do this internship, and then you do this internship. And, I went and worked at CNN in Washington as my first internship because my grandparents were living in DC at the time. And so it was great. I could go live with them for the summer. So I just sort of did everything I needed to do that was the easiest path to being able to get that first television journalism job.
So what was your first job? Where was that?
My first television job was in the Waco, Texas market, which was a tri market is what they call it. So it was Waco, Temple, and Killeen. And I started in the Temple Bureau, which was a town of about 50,000, because that's one of the things that they usually tell you in journalism school, that you will likely have to go to some really small town. And of course, I grew up in Houston. And so moving to Austin seemed like, kind of going to not a small town. It was much smaller back then, but that was kind of a step in the direction of getting a lot smaller than growing up in Houston. So moving to a town of 50,000 and of course this is Texas. So I remember somebody quickly asking me when I first moved there, they said, "Oh, do you have your season tickets?" And I said, "Season tickets?" And they said, "For the high school football games." And I was like, "Oh, no.
Not yet.
Football games when I was in high school, and I was a cheerleader, so I had to go. But I went to a pretty apathetic public high school in Houston, and we didn't have a whole lot of participation. So I thought, yeah, I would go to football games where I can watch people or I know people, but probably not where I don't. But anyway, so I knew that I would need to go to a small market. But it was interesting. And one of the things I think about reinvention that I think is interesting is that often I think that we have more confidence when we don't know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. And I remember, because I can remember so vividly sitting in one of my journalism classes, the very first one, and it was a class of about, I'm trying to remember if it was 14 or 28, but it was a small class because it was one of your upper division journalism classes. And I remember our professor saying, "I want you to look around the room because half of you will never get a job in television news."
Oh,
because it's so competitive. We had to audition to actually get into the sequence to be a broadcast journalism student. But it was so funny because I can remember thinking, well, gosh, I feel so bad for them. Like, it never occurred to me that it would be me, because I was very determined that I was going to do everything I needed to do in the right order and all of that. And it's true. Most, a good chunk of my fellow students maybe did a television stint for a very short time, but many not at all, because once you start doing internships and you realize, okay, this is kind of a strange world. And yeah, I don't see myself, or I don't want to work nights, and I don't want to work weekends, and I don't want to be up at 3 a.m, and I don't want to have to go live in a small town if that's not where I want to be. And so, a lot of people kind of self-selected themselves out before even graduation. And then certainly I think as you start looking for jobs and you realize, one of the job offers that I got, I was kind of picky actually, which again, maybe I was overconfident. I don't know, but I was like, no, I'm not taking that job, because I remember one of the job offers was literally 50 hours a week, and the pay was under $11,000 a year. Now, granted, this was a long time ago, but still, but in comparison to minimum wage, and I even said to them, I don't even know that was minimum wage actually. And if you're working 50 hours a week, I don't even have time to have a part-time job to try to make ends meet. So I turned down a few television jobs before I had a station that I kind of had my eye on that I really wanted to work at, and they just didn't have any openings at graduation. And television is also a field where nobody hires. It's not like the accountants and the engineers and the business people that have a job, 6 or 8 months before graduation, and they're just, taking the summer off and they're enjoying themselves because they're going to start their job in September. Television news is not like that at all. They just know that somebody else will take the job if you won't. And they don't pay well, and they still don't pay really well. And when they need you now. And so you can't really even start really applying really specifically for a specific job until you're available, because they're not going to hold a job for you, especially not an entry level. Now, maybe, in a higher level where they're waiting for somebody to leave, that might be different. But when it's an entry level job. So that's where I learned how to use triple coupons. And because I knew that when I went through the grocery store, I was pretty sure that HEB checker was making more than I was. And I had a college degree. My husband, when he took his first job in television, he was a sportscaster. His first job, he actually graduated and couldn't find a job at first, and wanted only television sports. He didn't want to do radio or do news. So he actually waited tables for a few months, went home, very humbling when you've got a college degree, and, he had done all the things. And so he waited tables and then got his first job that was minimum wage. So anyway, so it's tough. It's a tough industry, but I worked in the Waco market for 2.5 years. It learned so much, just learned and grew and did a lot of different things. And then when Mike and I got married, that's a whole nother long story. But when Mike and I got married, he was already working in Austin. So I left my job in Waco 2 weeks, I think it was, before we got married, and moved to Austin without a job because there hadn't been any openings. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, within about 2, I think it was only really about a month, my mentor who I'd worked for in college had become the news director. And TV is kind of that way where, the news director that is now at this station was somebody I interviewed with when I was, on my college interviewing trip that spring break, that now had gone to Wisconsin and had come back, but had also told me that I won't hire you because your husband would be working at the competition. So I moved to Austin knowing that there were 2 TV stations that might hire me, because the third had already said, I'm not going to hire you because your husband would be at the competition. So anyway, so it fortunately within about a month, I was able to come in and help produce for the summer. And then a reporter opening came open and I got that. So that led to the rest of my career there.
I love your tenacity. I love the fact that you're so focused. I love the fact that you didn't settle, and that you just worked hard. I love somebody who has that kind of a work ethic, mm-hmm. and just knows that you have to pay your dues. There's no free lunch, mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. It isn't necessarily what but who like you had connections, and that's kind of how the world works. So mm-hmm. I do recommend that people really make some strong connections as they're moving forward towards their goals. Right?
Absolutely. But I think it is interesting that I probably had less confidence applying for my second television job than I did for my first one, right? Just because you sort of realize, oh yeah, it's pretty hard. Those deadlines and some of those situations, we had one of my very first stories, we had a guy at a bank coming out across the street trying to, harass my photographer because he was shooting video of the bank, because the bank was going to be announcing the next day that it was during the SNL for the closures. And that bank was going to be closed the next day. And we'd gotten a tip about that. So we were just getting video of it. We weren't even talking to anybody. And we were across the street, and this man comes across the street and like tries to knock the camera, wants to try to get the photographer to quit shooting. And I remember thinking, here I was with my eyes like this big going, oh, wow, this is real. This is real stuff. This is real life,
Yeah. So, what actually led you to your first reinvention? Like, tell us how you made a transition from being a full-time newscaster. Then what? Like, how long did you do that before you made a shift and did something else?
I was a full-time newscaster. When my son was born, I still continued to work full-time, and my husband was working full-time as well. We were both at the TV station together. We actually anchored together for about 1.5 years when he was little. And so we would actually be on the set together, and I'd have to say, oh, and hey, Mike's here with sports. And only once did I call him by the wrong name, but that was because I called him the weather person. And anyway, it was funny, so we did that, and we structured our schedules so that we both worked weekends for a while. So I would take Monday, Tuesday off. He would take Wednesday, Thursday off. And so we only overlapped on Friday and then the weekends. So we did all kinds of crazy stuff with our schedules to make it work to where we only had to have a babysitter, full time 2 afternoons a week or 3 afternoons a week for both of us working full time. So we worked it so that one of us was with him. And we did that for until I was pregnant with our daughter. And before she was born, I had kind of been toying with the idea. And it was just one of those, just the perfect timing when I had mentioned it to my boss that, hey, it'd be kind of great to, I'd love the idea of let's looking at maybe me being part-time, which they didn't normally do at the TV station I was at. And because they didn't have part-time on air people. But so it just so happened that they were wanting to launch a weekend morning show. And they said, okay, here's what we could do is if you'll launch this morning show. So at that time I was anchoring weekends. So I was anchoring the 6 and 10 on the weekends and then reporting 3 days during the week. And they said, okay, what we could do is that if you'll do the morning show on the weekend and you work 2 12-hour shifts on Saturdays and Sundays, you can go part-time. So I basically worked, my contract was 25 hours a week in 2 days. And so, I was used to working a 10-hour day anyway. So, I thought, 2 hours more, that's no big deal. But to be able to get the Monday through Friday off was a huge thing. So when Taylor was born, I actually launched that show 3 weeks before she was born. We launched it at the very beginning of January, and it was a morning show. So I was switching my schedule to doing mornings versus doing nights. But we launched 3 weeks, and then I had her, I think I did it one Saturday, and then, Saturday and Sunday, then the next Saturday she was born. And then I took part of the compromise was that I said, okay, I'll only take 4 weeks off for the show, and then I'll just come back. And then so after, I forget if it was 4 or 6 weeks, but it was a short amount of time. But then I just went back and I would only go in and anchor the show, and then I would leave, because when my 12-hour shifts were anchoring the show and then turning around and being the dayside reporter and doing a story for 5 or 6. So
I was wondering what all those other hours were dedicated to. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So because it was able to relieve them from having a dayside reporter, because I was that person. I was kind of doing, double duty, if you will. So I did that. So, and then I was able to do that. I think I did that another 8 weeks or something, where I just anchored, for those, I was only in the station for like those 4 hours a day. And, in some ways having it being the second child, although crazier, it was still, it was manageable. And Mike was off on the weekends. But I remember, crazy stories of, he'd have to bring her up there so I could try to nurse between after doing the show and then having to, anyway, it was just nutty. So, but, I remember all kinds of crazy things, even when my son was born. And because I actually taught my first journalism class that I taught at UT was actually while I was on maternity leave when Brandon was born, my son, because my boss at the time didn't have children, and she'd heard that they needed a professor for the summer. And summer school schedule is tough because it's a pretty, it's not like just an hour and a half class 3 times a week. It was every single day. And so she actually said, well, I bet Kim can do it. She'll be off, even though I had literally just had a baby 2 months ago, but 2 months earlier, but it was perfect. I loved it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was crazy. I'd bring him up or have to bring my pump. And anyway, it was just more than you probably want to know, but it was just, we all have kind of those crazy stories. But anyway, so I was able to be part-time for anchoring the morning show and doing the day side shift. And then not too long, I think it was even within that first year, a new news director came in and actually said, I want you to go back to doing nights because I like you better, doing the night show. And that's a more important role, if you will. So I went back to anchoring weekend evenings, and actually it turned out I didn't have to work as many hours. So that was good. So that was more manageable. Yeah, we did that 4 years of me being part-time at the TV station. By that time, Mike was Monday through Friday. So he worked Monday through Friday. I worked Saturday and Sunday. And so, except during football season where we would overlap and have to get babysitters on Saturdays when he worked, one of us was always with them. The challenge is that one of us was always working when the other one wasn't. And so it got to where if we wanted to take a family day, my husband had to take a vacation day so that we could actually all be together for the whole day.
Yeah, that's
tough. A little tough. So we did that. So again, we managed that for 4 years. And interestingly, about 6 months or probably 8 months before, about six or 7 months before my contract was up I'd had 1 2-year contract part-time, and then they agreed to let me go 2 more years. Although I kind of had gotten some inclinations at that time that, we're going to let you do this for another 2 years, but we're probably going to need you to come back. Likely you're going to need to be full-time again at the end of this period, but we'll take it one step at a time. And so about 6 or 7 months before my contract was up, I had been introduced to this direct sales company, and I just thought, well, that sounds kind of fun. And I'd also taught in between time, I'd already also taught that fall, I had also taught another journalism class at the University of Texas for the fall. So in some ways I ended up with 3 part-time jobs. I'd quit working full-time at the TV station, but then I was working for a nonprofit that was journalism related. And then I also started doing this direct sales company because again, I was working part-time. My husband was in television, which even though the pay is better in Austin, it's still not you probably don't get paid what you might think that you do. And so we were just looking for ways of being able to sort of, be able to maintain things. So I just kind of as a whim said, hey, honey, it was right in November before the holidays. So I thought, well, this is the perfect time to try it before the holidays and people are buying gifts and stuff. And my husband just looked at me he was like, is this because you don't have enough to do already? Because keep in mind, I was already working at the TV station. I was working for the nonprofit, and I was wrapping up finishing was I teach? I think I'd already taught before, but I was literally working 2 part-time jobs already. And he said, and that's because you don't have enough to do, and you have kids that are 4 and 7. And I was like, well, I'll just try it. And what a blessing it was, because when I did have my meeting a couple of months later that said, when I went in to talk to my boss about my job, I remember sitting in the car before I went in and just said, okay, God, you've got to make this really clear as to what you want me to do. Do you want me to stay doing this, or is it time for me to do something else? And I can remember sitting at that table with my news director at the lunch table, and he said, I need you to come back full time. And I said, okay, so is it full time or no time? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, well, that's, something for me to think about. Yeah. Yeah. I just want to be clear. And so I got into the car, and I remember thinking, okay, well, I guess that made it pretty clear, because he had already decided that with Mike's crazy schedule, he worked until 11 every single night, and my kind of crazy schedule, and we didn't have any family time together, it would have just been really challenging. And so we had kind of already decided that we didn't think me going back full time would be a really viable option for just the way we wanted to live, because it's hard to have childcare when you tell a babysitter, well, one, you can't have typical childcare anyway. And you can't really, it's hard if you have to say, okay, I might be home by 6:30, but it could be 7, might be 8, maybe 10:30 after the news. I'm, if there's spot news or something, can you be flexible like that? Most people probably can't. And we didn't have any family in town to be able to rely on either. So because I had already started doing that direct sales company and had that little part-time job with the nonprofit, did it give me sort of the confidence to think, okay, I think I can make this work. And because I knew that I still needed to be able to bring in an income. It wasn't that I was going to be able just to, to stay at home and start a tennis, start taking tennis lessons or start a tennis group. I knew that I was still going to have to bring in an income, but could it look a little bit different? And so I stuck with the direct sales company I did, and I kept working for the nonprofit for a while, for several years, and then finally dropped that. But I worked for the direct sales company for 10 years. And it's so funny when I look back, because at the time I just remember thinking, okay, I'm a hardcore journalist, and this was a really hard left.
What's a hard left?
I mean, just like, how do you go from, talking about news and, covering the Branch Davidians and, the bombing in the Olympics in Atlanta, which I was there when it happened. How do you go from that to, hey, let's talk about decorating ideas for your hurricane for Halloween. I can give you some great ideas.
So, yeah, it's quite a shift. And I'm but the thing is, you brought skills to that. Mm-hmm. You like in direct sales, you do presentations and you talk to people, and there's a lot of communication skills that you utilize in that. So that's pretty cool. What did you learn about yourself during this reinvention, and were you conscious of it, or was it just like, whoop, I'm just going to do this? But
I think that I kind of I sort of stumbled into that, completely. It was just like, hey, let's give it a try. And I'm not a quitter. And so I just felt like, okay, well, let's see if we can make this work. And I realized quickly, I started in November, and they announced this first incentive trip in January that was going to be that you had until the end of April to earn. And this was while I was still working at the TV station. And I thought, a free trip? Absolutely. I'm all in. And so I did everything I needed to do to earn that trip for both of us. And it's funny because we went on that trip in June, and then my very last weekend, the timing just happened to be that way. The very next weekend was my last weekend at the TV station. And, on that trip, I remember us having long discussions about, so how much, what do I need to be able to earn? And, what are the things that I need to be able to contribute so that we can make this work? And also, fortunately, not even probably a year after I'd left the TV station, they called me, and I've been doing freelance work for them ever since for the sales department. So I've done, sponsored content, some other things like that have been much more flexible schedule, and the deadlines are different. Nobody's yelling at you. You don't feel like you have a pit in your stomach. I mean, I literally still, when I walk into the newsroom, can have just like this visceral stomach ache because it's so stressful, that you just remember those feelings. But so I feel like in many ways I sort of stumbled upon, that I would never have thought, I never sat and thought, okay, what can I do that would allow me to do this? So I feel like God has just really led me in many ways of just, okay, let's try this. Well, this seems to be working. Okay, let's just try this a little bit longer. And then, doing the freelance work that I've done for corporate videos and those kinds of things, it's fun and it's easy. I know how to do that. And so it's just, I feel like he's just led me to being able to sort of piece things together. Now, sometimes it probably would have been easier just to go get one full-time job than to have managed multiple part-time, but it worked for our family because we had just such weird scheduling where Mike, during football season, he often couldn't come home for dinner. And so it was challenging. And every football season, he worked 6 days a week. And so it was great that I was able to be flexible while still bringing in an income to be able to make that work with our family. And to where, I feel like I would have people say like, oh, you retired, you're a stay-at-home mom. And I'm like, oh no, I think it's so much harder now with trying to piece together sometimes that than if I was just able to go to a job, leave it there and come home. But it just, I feel like my kids felt like I was around. Now they will tell me like, oh, mommy, you were late but Taylor still says, remember when you were late for that gymnastics recital? And I said, I swear they told me it started at 6:15 and not at 6, or whatever. So there were certainly some crazy moments of, oh my gosh, something happened and I need to get somebody to take you, can somebody pick you up and take you home or, whatever. But so I feel like mine have very, in some ways have been kind of not necessarily super thought out. They just kind of happened and they seem to work. Certainly this last reinvention, if you will, of kind of going back to my roots was definitely something that I thought about a lot and really pondered and prayed about and really, just really thought about, is this the right thing? And I kept coming back to, as much as I would think, well, should I do real estate? Should I do this? And I would come back to, this is what I know. And this is what I'm good at. So why can't, what if I can share my skills in a way that have helped me be able to have, 30 years of being able to, get paid to be on television. Let me try to use that knowledge and that expertise to help other people, especially in this world now where video, even 6 weeks ago, everything was moving toward video, but especially in the last 6 weeks, everything is video, whether we like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially now. I think those two words are going to be, I don't know, there's going to be a hashtag, especially now or something like that, because that's the way it is. But what I love that you are in tune with what's important to you, your family, the family time, God, you don't make decisions on your own. You definitely consult a higher intelligence and power in God. And and so it seems like you've just been following that your whole life, which is such a gift. And some of us could really benefit from trying to do that more, because really when you listen deep and you consult, then you get a clearer direction. I love that you got clarity on that last one. So now tell us about BarnesMedia and how you can help people with their own reinventions, because I really think a lot of people right now, especially now, are trying to build, a persona online or a business, or even, and I know you do some corporate stuff too. So you help in the corporate world. So tell us about what you're doing and all of that.
Well, I think that, I believe, and my husband does as well from his experience too, that showing up on video or being on camera is the next best thing to being with someone in person. It used to be that we only had the option of talking to somebody on the phone or being with them. But now I can really get a good sense of who you are and what you are about and some of your traits and your personality and whether I'm going to click with you by seeing you on video. So as part of anybody's reinvention or just even in their continuation of their business, it's just the greatest way for you to really help people know what you're about. And I think that, when you think about, especially for those of us who are a little older and have more life experiences behind us, how great that you can use all of that. If you've been a mom, whether you've been a stay-at-home mom or a working mom, or you had a corporate job and then you've done something and then you've done direct sales and then you've done something else. Think about all the stories and examples and just life experiences that you have that you can share, and maybe funny stories and things like that a lot of people don't know because you were either, in the corporate world or in this situation and it really wasn't appropriate perhaps to share some of those stories. But now you have the opportunity to be able to show up as you want to show up. And I think that video is such a great way to be able to share that with people. And so what we've been doing is just really working with people to help them have that comfort and confidence on camera so that they can be able to show up in an authentic way, because you've got to be who you are. You can't show up as somebody else because there's a disconnect at some point.
Yes.
You can't pretend to be somebody else. And, then you also have so we've done that through a variety of ways. We've done workshops and we've worked one-on-one with people. One of the fun things that we started doing in January, which I have just been so pleased with, is that we do this 10-day online on-camera challenge and coaching program, because we know that if you practice and you get feedback in coaching and you practice some more, you're going to see better results than if I just give you a ton of information and say, okay, good luck. Because a lot of times it's like, we've all been to those seminars and you come home with that whole, spiral full of all the notes you've taken. And, you've probably heard the term before, shelf help, and it just goes right on your shelf.
Yes.
And never to consider again. Or even if you have it out, you sit down and you think, oh yeah, okay, I need to do this. And then you get to that first step and you think, oh, okay, now do I do this or do I do this first? And so it's just hard if you don't have some help along the way. So what we've done with this coaching program is just the results have been amazing, because you just can't help but get better if you do 10 days of practice. We give you over 14 days to get practice, and get feedback. But when you do that, you see just amazing results. So that's been one thing that's been really fun that we've been working with kind of small business owners. We've had professional speakers, we've had corporate trainers, we've had travel agents, we've had business coaches, real estate agents. I mean, really almost any industry that you can think of, we've had in the last few months. And we've been running them since March, when the shutdown happened. We've been doing it every 2 weeks. So we just started a group a week ago Monday, and we're going to start a new group next Monday as well. And then the other thing we've been doing with businesses, so with teams or organizations, really working to help them with their teams being able to show up better for virtual communication, because, video, it's all this. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all in how you communicate, but there are nuances when I'm staring at my computer versus when I have people in front of me. It's very different. And so we've been working a lot with companies that want to be able to have their executives or their trainers or their HR people be able to really show up well with the people that they're working with and the people that they're going to be training. And so that they can really just, and also be able to create some of that video content they might want to be able to do, so that they have things to be able to share with their audience and their clients. One of the HR companies that we worked with, they're now doing a weekly little video tip that they put in their weekly email that just says, hey, here's our tip of the week to help you with your HR as you go through this crisis. And so it's been really fun to see them starting to implement what we've taught them. And so that's fun, because we can, just like everything else, we do it all virtually. So we can do it, we can work with anybody anywhere, because it's all done virtually.
Fantastic. I love that. So how can people get a hold of you, Kim? Like, where can you send them to find out about your workshops, find out about your consulting?
Thank you. Yes, so our website is just BarnesTeamMedia.com. And on there, you'll even see that there's a page that's for virtual communication. And we have just a quick little 3-minute video that will give you just some instant tips to instantly make your virtual meetings look better and sound better. So that's available on that page as well. And it gives some information. And then also there's a tab for our challenge as well. And that, again, the next group starts on Monday. And it's just been so fun to see the results. But yeah, you can get that little training video on our website. And I also have added on the bottom of our website, there's just a little place that if you'd like just to be kept up to date on when we have programs coming up, or when we release a training video or some little tips. We're just starting kind of a newsletter. It's still very occasional, but we hope to get that a little bit more regular. And so if you'd like to just be on that list so that you'll be notified, I've got a little place on the bottom of the website on the homepage where you can just subscribe to that. And it won't be like the Macy's one where you get 3 emails a day. I promise.
Oh my gosh, I'm telling you what.
Yeah.
I know we don't. Well, I have signed up for that. So I'm looking forward to getting your updates as well. And any last tips for anyone contemplating a reinvention? What would be supportive in considering making a change?
I would say that be confident in what you know and what you have experienced. Because again, as any life that we've lived, we've learned from. And so I feel like a lot of times we downplay what we know. And also the things that are easy for us aren't always easy for somebody else. So for me, a lot of times I think, well, why wouldn't they know not to shoot up their nose when they're on video? Mm-hmm. You don't know what you don't know. And so we have to be, we need to think about and own the things that we know that a lot of other people don't. And the more confident you can be in the fact that, hey, I know a few things and I can share those with others, I think that in and of itself builds our confidence. And certainly when you know the things that you can do, especially on video, so that you know you're going to look and sound good, which is a lot of what we do in our programs. When you know the things that you can control, then you're able to just really think about, then what am I going to say? Because you just know the other parts are already dialed in. And so it just makes it, I find that gives people a lot of confidence as well, because they just can feel good about the fact that I know they're going to be able to hear me, and and I'm going to look good. And so that now I just need to own that I know things, and I have value to share.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. And it's like, that's how a lot of people go from working in a corporate environment to becoming a consultant, because they take what they know and then they go out and they build their business and they share that. So
yeah.
Wow, good stuff, Kim. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being with me tonight.
And don't be afraid to fail a little bit. It's really hard for me as a perfectionist. That's a really hard word for me to say, but I like to always say, just be taking imperfect action.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not a perfectionist, so that might come across. I don't know, but that's just who I am.
There's a balance, and my husband is not as much of one. So he's kind of a boom, get it done, and I'm kind of on the other end. So he kind of pulls me this way sometimes, and I pull him back a little bit. So hopefully we kind of meet in the middle most of the time. But it can be really difficult if you are a perfectionist. And I think maybe that's why journalism was such a good field for me, because your deadlines are built in and they don't move. The 6 o'clock news starts at the 6 o'clock. It doesn't matter if you want to tweak a few shots that you're editing still. It doesn't matter. It still needs to make it. So I'm really good at meeting deadlines for other people. But yeah, as a perfectionist, it can just be overwhelming if you let it get to you. So we really need people like you who can kind of just, give us a little kick in the pants and really encourage us to get out there and do something, because you don't know if it's going to work until you try.
Yeah. And be okay with failing, because you got to fail up anyway. So thank you again, Kim. Now is as good a time as any to reinvent your life. If you need help with that, you can certainly contact me. You can find me at lisanellercoaching.com and reinventionlifecoach.com. I also have a Facebook page. So the business page is facebook.com/Lisa Neller Coaching. That's Neller with a K. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and have a fabulous week. And we'll be back next week with, next week's topic is going to be how to date online during a pandemic. So stay tuned.
That'll be interesting.
Thanks, Kim. All right, everybody, have a great night.